Yes, guys, I'm Si. Welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show, powered by Violent Money. Please do check out Violent Money TV on YouTube, and of course, check out all the Violent Money apparel and products at violentmoney.co.uk. You can use the discount code ACE20 for 20% off, and they've got lots of lovely stuff there for that. And of course, check out the Violent Money Academy, which is the first smart gym in the UK. They've also got social medias for that as well. So please do give them a follow. Tell them we sent you and all that good stuff. We are live on YouTube, but if you prefer your podcast in audio form, we have the Danny Batten Fight Show and all of our other series and content produced by A.C.E Podcast Nation, available through the Sports Social Podcast Network. So do check them out. All that good stuff. There's lots of good stuff to be had, as it were. But today's show is brought to you by Heights. Heights is the world's number one brain care brand. What is brain care, I hear you ask? Brain care is when you care for your brain. It does not get any simpler than that. It means caring for something that has been caring for you secretly since the minute you were born, your brain. Its movement and all the actions, behaviors that set up you to live your life on your terms. It's good nutrition, switching off, sleeping deeply, moving your body and staying curious is where it begins. Good brain care habits affect more than your brain. They have knock-on effects and benefits into your real life, your well-being, your mental health, and of course your physical health. We want to show people all ways that you can practice brain care and how they're already doing so. This isn't a one-off. Forming habits and routines which incorporate brain care is essential to help your brain thrive every single day. Can't focus, always tired, feeling up, then down. The Smart Supplements top-rated formula of 20 key vitamins and minerals, including vitamins D, C, B12, blueberries, omega-3, targets everything from poor sleep to brain fog to stress, so you feel better every single day. The Smart Supplement combines the 20 highest quality nutrients for the better brain and health, mental well-being now and for the future. 2 capsules a day contain the ingredients that are proven to improve sleep and energy, sharpens focus, memory, boosts your mood, and help to manage stress. You probably already invest a lot of time and energy into your skincare, your health care, your hair care. But what about your brain care? Why prioritize that? Why prioritize what's on your head over what's inside your head? So if you go to yourheights.com now to start your brain care journey, and today, guess what? You can use the promo code ACE Nation to get 10% off your first subscription order. So that's go to yourheights.com and use the promo code ACE Nation and get 10% off. Your future will thank you. That was a long old one, but there we go. Yeah, check out that. I've been taking them actually over the last week, and I noticing a difference. I gotta say, just feel a bit fresher and a bit, just generally a bit better, a bit sharper. But we'll see. We'll see how I'll keep you informed. But 10% off, good start. And as also, they are recommended by Stephen Fry, so you don't get many bigger brains than that, I don't think. But joining me, as ever, is none other than former Cage Warriors champion, UK MMA legend, is none other than Mr. Daniel Batten. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing good, but it seems like I could be doing better. I might have to invest in some of that product myself. Yeah. I'm going to have a little look into that.
Heights.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, excited about this week. We've had a fantastic UFC. Can't wait to get talking about that a little later. But more exciting things beforehand, right?
Yeah, as always, mate, we have a top guest from the world of combat sports. you will have seen him on the UK circuit, European circuit, and very excited. Maybe even have a little bit of news for us in a minute. But we're delighted to welcome MMA Featherweight Mr. Jeremy Petley to the show. How are you, mate?
Very well. Thank you for having me, guys. Really happy to be here.
Good stuff. No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you, mate. Heights.com. That's what yourheights.com. Use that. Stephen Fry says it's all right. I say that I take that as that's good because he's got a big brain. So, as you mentioned, Danny, we had some incredible fights last night, which we'll talk about later. There was some absolute bangers, some incredible finishes, lots to discuss, bit of news as well, retirements, lots to talk about. But before that, we're going to have a chat to Jeremy. So, Jeremy, most recently, you were lined up to fight Tobias Harria on the Cage Warriors card, but it fell through. Was that an injury to yourself, wasn't it?
Yeah, I blew my ankle about nearly last week camp, to be honest. Recovered well. I haven't didn't linger really or anything, but it's just one of those injuries. Very irritating, bad timing, and debilitating considering the trivialness of the injury itself, But no, I'm feeling really well recovered. Strong, camp's going great, and I got another fight coming up, focusing on. So I've got my eyes peeled purely on that. Now I'm feeling healthy as I can be. Mid camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's one of those where it's frustrating, isn't it? When you've done your camp and that last week you're kind of doing the last minute preparations, and then
end of camp. That's the worst.
It's unfortunately can't be helped.
That's the game. It does happen.
So you mentioned just before we went on air that you've got a fight, and you just mentioned it again there. You have got a fight lined up. Are you able to tell us anything about that?
Yes, sir. So I'll be fighting in London at Cage Warriors 141, I believe, and that'll be against Steve Amiable.
Oof.
Oh, good.
So I'm looking very much forward to that. I know a little bit about the guy as far as I've seen him fight. I know what he brings to the table. I know he's scrappy, also very technical, and to a certain degree pretty well rounded. So I envisage this being, it could be a very good fight, but certainly I envisage it being an opportunity for me to show my level and to make a statement. That's the goal,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had Steve on before, and he's had some great fights over the years. Very experienced fighter. Who's that's going to be a very really interesting fight. And funny enough, Corley from Violent Money told me, he said, Jeremy is one to really, really keep an eye on. He highly rates you. So I'll be very, very much looking forward to that fight, because that's going to be a good one on the big stage, mate, as well.
Yes, sir. I've been around the circuit for a little while and stuff, but I feel like with this being my Cage Warrior debut, definitely feel like I'm on a platform, and so I feel definitely a little extra motivation to kind of showcase who I am and what I'm able to do. So definitely opportunity, right? Big stage, like you said.
Yeah, and that's what it is, isn't it? It's about taking those opportunities when you get the chance to to fight on the bigger cards and the bigger stages. It's really show what you can do, and you don't want to come out of those big events feeling like you could have done more, or you were within yourself. We see sometimes fighters go in there on the big stage, and they almost are more concerned with not losing as opposed to going out and making that statement. But what type of fighter do you see yourself as? Do you like a very attacking fighter or tactical, strategic?
I would say myself, I would, hard to pigeonhole, but I'd say, that I'm aggressive, but at the same time, I'm tactical, I think I know how to win rounds, and, I know when to throw caution to the wind more, when to be more conservative, that's part of the game too. So where I think I'm aggressive and a pretty exciting fighter, I know that, the part of the game, of course, is being smart, and you have to be calculative as well. So I feel like I have a good balance of that, but skill set wise, I feel like I have the ability definitely to run through any featherweight in the Cage Warrior division.
So, Jeremy, what I was going to say before someone in the comments, no doubt will, is your accent throws me a little bit because one second you sound like quite English and then you get that Canadian twang. Tell us a little bit about your sort of your background and how you came to be where you are today. Sure.
The story of the wonky hybrid accent. My mom is Canadian. My dad is English. And I was born and raised in Canada, in Victoria, Vancouver Island on the West Coast. I moved over to England. I moved over to England when I was 17. So I've lived like over half my life here. It's just one of those things, I moved over and started living my life, and the days pass and suddenly I've been living here for 20 years. So something like that. But yeah, as far as the accent goes, it's like I've gone back to Canada and they say, "Oh my God, you sound so English." And then here, obviously, I sound a bit Canadian, but as you've picked up a strange twang, and I think it depends as well. Like sometimes if I hang out with my family more, I'll sound a little bit more Canadian. Yeah, for sure. What about in terms of your journey into kind of combat sports? Was that something that you'd always had an interest in, or was it something you developed a bit later? Or I'd always had a keen interest in combat sports. I've been a fan of boxing in the early 90s when the early stages of MMA came out. I was hot on it kind of thing. But I had always been, as a young kid and as a teenager and young adult as well, I'd always trained to be a footballer. My first passion was football. My dad being English really turned me on to that, And I didn't really get my foot in the door. You know how it is with football. And I think I just kind of fell out of love with it, to be honest. And it was one of those things, I think, where, I knew I felt like I was an athletic being and I felt like an elite athlete, but didn't really know where to channel it. So I started going to MMA classes just as a kind of curiosity thing. Probably I looked at the first couple seasons of The Ultimate Fighter, and when you get to see the train, kind of, because you see more backstage, and I think for me that was kind of maybe a little incentive to think, maybe I can do that. But it was very gradual. It wasn't like a sudden decision. Even then, I was doing it as a hobby. It was very gradual as I started to realize, I'm picking this up kind of quick. And I think that as my skill evolved, so did my expectations of myself and my goals, really, in relation to MMA. Would you say you were someone who took to it quite naturally, or was it something you needed to work quite hard at before you were able to? I think I took to it quite naturally. In the spectrum of things, I think I took to it quite naturally. As you guys know, it's like obviously it's like a battle and a constant evolution. So yeah, I'd say I took to it quite naturally, but at the same time, it's hard to measure that because the job of MMA fighters is constantly to scrutinize yourself and never to be happy. So it's hard to reconcile that with the mindset.
Yeah, so many times, Jeremy, so many people that have got into martial arts before, particularly during my era, we are talking about two different eras here, really. But, everyone had a background in martial arts of some sorts. But you're talking, hey, I just went along MMA. Is that pretty much what it was? You just jumped straight into learning?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was MMA was my interest. I did not watch jiu-jitsu and was not interested fundamentally in like jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff like that. What I fell in love with was the combat sports of it. Absolutely. The no holds barred is what attracted me for sure. Yeah. I just noticed actually that you actually fought one of Danny's students on Bellator London back in 2019. You fought Tom Mearns. Sure. Tom. And you beat Tom as well. There you go. Yeah. Poor coach.
Very
good.
Poor coach.
Yeah.
Poor coaching by Dan.
I think you were scoring all the takedowns. Was that the one you were scoring all the takedowns?
I was hitting the takedowns. It was
really
a couple
well on him.
Years out, and I think I was a couple years inactive. And I think that perhaps looking back at it now, maybe I would have been less conservative. But I think that in my setups of the takedown, because you know how it is to get that touch, that sensitivity, I felt maybe I was over setting up the takedowns. But I hit him. I hit the takedowns. I did what I needed to do, control the fight, win the fight. So, all in all,
I remember it. It's become problematic, and it was one of those things that Tom just didn't have the timing to defend, and it was a very helpless feeling in the corner.
Yeah, I think that if you want an inside perspective from inside the cage, what I felt in that fight was where I wasn't able to advance from half guard a lot, or I'd pass, he'd recover, and that kind of thing. And I was only able to get off a certain amount of ground and pound, but at the same time, I was able to control things. I felt like, and maybe part of what I was waiting for is, like, I knew he was losing the fight. And I guess I felt like I was waiting, or that I earned the right to wait for, he needed to sacrifice something, you know? If you want to get up these days, you can't recover half guard and you need to scramble, you need to turtle, you need to maybe give your back. You need to risk a worst, letting your opponent progress sometimes in order to. So I would say that maybe in that fight, I know he was complaining a little bit, like he didn't like the way I won the fight. But I would say to him with that one, I mean, I thought personally that he didn't want bad enough to stand up. Like or rather, he started to stand up. And when you see me progressing, getting a love handle of the hip, starting to go to the back, he regresses. You know what I mean? So I think that in the same way that I know that some guys have get a little bit of grief from fans and other fighters for keeping the fight down and making the control more of a priority, I think sometimes as well those fighters on the bottom need to understand, because they're in such a negative position, they have to be a little bit more desperate. They have to pull the goalie, right? Yeah, you have to pull the goalie when you're 1-0 down, you know. So that's the way I kind of saw it.
Sure. I remember, really having strong words with Tom after the fight, not on his performance, but his attitude about the performance. We've discussed before, haven't we, Si? Tom's gone through a lot of private issues in his private life that he's happy for me to mention, but not in terms of going into details. And I remember his head was in a really bad place with myself and with other people. There's certainly no excuses, but I'm on about the attitude. I remember I wasn't very happy when he was just like, it's supposed to be a fight. I'm like, no, Tom, this is a combat sport. You have to be clever. He was just posing a problem for you you couldn't find an answer for. That's not his fault. He did exactly what he should be doing. Tom sometimes wants to almost aggravate someone to get into a dogfight with him, because that's how most of his performance have been. But I thought it was a really good strategy that you did. And, I try to educate him in that point. You're going to come across people that do the smart thing and don't want to get in a dogfight all the time. And, it's been one of those things that he's had to get into many of those dogfights to sort of like learn that ain't always the right way. But he still had one hell of a fight again the previous time out.
Respect to Tom. I mean, like, we're talking about, even if I win every round of that fight, we're still talking about, inches. Do you know what I mean? Like, the difference was when you get to an elite level, the difference between dominating a round and losing a round can be marginal. Do you know what I mean? So it's like that. Like, you got to give respect to the guy's level. Like, no question.
And I think the other thing as well is there's certain fighters who, like Tom, who want to be in that. They want to go to war and they're on the feet and they want to have a back and forth, and they want to push you from that point of view. So intelligent fighters will try to work against that and take them down and not get into a dogfight with him, because that suits his strengths, if you get what I mean. And I think that's what ultimately with sport is what you're trying to do, isn't it? You're trying to stick to your own qualities and nullify your opponent's.
And that's why like MMA is kind of like such a unique and interesting sport as well, is because like in most sports where there's only a limited amount of a skill set used, or I guess a limited variation of a skill set used, it's hard to explain, I guess, but it's with boxing, for example, you can outpunch someone, you can outmove someone and stuff. But I feel like with MMA, there's what you do, but then there's what the other guy does, and that exists much more because you can like counter and cock block kind of the other guy's plan, because there's such a variation in things you can do in MMA. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I definitely find that more than, I think in a lot of sports it's like focus on your own game, yeah, of course, but I think with MMA more than any other sport, because it's such a vast variation of what you can physically do to fight somebody, and overpower them. It's it's funny like that, isn't it? It's
Yeah, the potential. There's so many different variants to potentially lose, but on the flip side of that, there's so many variants to win.
Exactly.
I think that's what makes it.
The most dangerous guy in the world. There's always going to be a little a little avenue, right?
Sure. It's never over till it's over, and it's never as clean cut as people, most people would say. And most of the time, it is this way. One person is going to be winning on the feet. If you can keep it there, that's the way he's going to win. And then you could look on the flip side of that someone needs to be on the ground. Well, in MMA, in a weird conundrum, if you think about the Randy Couture era, if they were proficient enough not to be taken down, he would just beat them up on the fence. So, just fighting on the fence in itself has become a system in its own right, regardless of the takedown or scramble up. Some people just push you up against the fence to beat upon you there. If you haven't got answers for it.
Big fan, yeah.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued with the cage work. I think it's one of the more, one of the areas that's still subject to people to think about other ideas and innovate some theories about how to deal with things, both with the back against the fence and facing the fence. I still think there's new things to come out, as I do there are in the other areas as well. I just think, I think that the strongest strategical things that people are doing is learning to anti everything, the anti-wrestling and the anti-jiu-jitsu and the anti-striking. Indeed, this is the kind of thing I love about MMA, is that you could be a less technical as good striker, yet you can still outstrike someone who's a better striker, because you have the wrestling capability in that you can strike and layer yourself in, and before a return comes, you can clinch up. And then, of course, you can strike off the break if you've got advantageous arm position. So you're striking on the way in, striking on the way out. Where's the striker, the more proficient striker? Where's he got space to work? And so it could become interesting in that format too. Just because someone's better in a particular area doesn't mean that they can get off and showcase their skills against a camp.
100%. I mean, the way I like to say it, I've said this, I think the other week I was talking to this dude, and it's like what changes striking, what makes striking for MMA, and it's not the wrestling, it's not the takedown itself, is simply the element of the possibility of the takedown.
Yes.
The minute you bring in just the possibility of the takedown, just little level changes here and there, the feints, everything changes about the striking. So what you mentioned before about the cage, I think is a more solid new art form that kind of emerged from MMA, isn't it? Because cage work in itself could almost be a sport. Do you know what I mean?
It's a system in its own right.
Different element,
yeah.
But it's the where the takedowns, where the striking is still striking, but again, so it's more like, what do you call it? It's like a more symbolic difference, But the striking changes, those boxers. You can box. It's like my last fight. I fought a really good boxer, bare knuckle fighter as well. But again, it's when you simply add the element, when that guy knows he can't let go of his punches for fear of takedowns and stuff like that. It does change the energy. It changes the elements of the situation.
Yeah, I think Khabib's a good demonstration of someone that was not as good a striker as many of the combatants that he had come up against and faced. You could look at Conor McGregor as a classic example. Conor McGregor got knocked off his feet with an overhand because of the whole threat of the takedown. And it's something that I've always discussed with my students or other strikers saying, but I would just do this and I'd just do that. I try to explain, particularly like boxers who need to, their orbit before they go into an attack and counterattack is a little closer, isn't it? Because we've got, the calf kicks, and we got center line kicks, such as side kicks to the body. You get some fighters that fight like that in that way, and the threat of the takedown. The range is very, very slightly longer. Definitely. And also I get some interesting conversations with, more one-on-one wrestlers, more freestyle wrestlers, saying, well, I'll just shoot in and take you down. Well, yeah, you would do if we were just touching on the forehead and shooting in, but you ain't doing that in MMA. When one person's dominating the range and pushing you back, suddenly it ain't just straight one-on-one wrestling either.
No, exactly. That's it.
I think we may have lost sight, but we'll carry on. One of the things I was going to say earlier was that, when we was talking about Tom and we're talking about you shooting in and controlling the situation, one thing I don't want the viewers to get thinking that you're a one type of trick pony in that you just shoot and take down? Because I've seen a few of your fights. One of them that really stood out as an absolute war was against Martin Stapleton. You really traded shots with each other there. I mean, it's an absolute slugfest, but a technical one at that. So I would argue you're very, very well-rounded. But as much as you're well-rounded, have you got a comfort zone for you? Is there an area that you do feel more comfortable in?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying that as well, because of course I can bang and I can trade, if I need to, especially but no, make no mistake, I can strike, but I believe where I'm world class is my ability to take fight down and control it, to submit guys to ground and pound. That ground game, I believe that my striking and my setups and my footwork and all those things, they're good. But ultimately, I do want them to be feeding in toward what I do, which is I do want to be taking guys down, enforcing and ground and pounding and looking for that sub, because that's my best game. But of course, like you said, you just alluded to a second ago, it's not as simple as being able to shoot and take someone down. That's why it's so important to be able to strike. If you can, good striking makes easy takedowns, doesn't it? So.
Sure. And one thing that I noticed, you're southpaw.
Yes.
And, is this something that you feel would add to being advantageous for you in that you're in that stance all the time, but predominantly orthodox fighters are normally sparring and training with orthodox fighters?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm sure in every camp we have people of opposite footwork, but you're there all the time. Would you say this has given you any kind of edge in any way, or do you think that's not the case anymore?
I think that it gives me generally. I think that it gives you southpaws tend to have an edge because they're always southpaws and they're always against orthodox, like you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it gives me an advantage as well because it plays interesting with my entries. So I feel like my combos and my entries, I think it gives me good options. I like to shoot for that single leg, so I think southpaw against orthodox, that works well for me. Yeah,
because the leg's so close, right? Obviously, when you've got matching stances, it's a little different. You're more tackle, both legs or the hips. That's interesting. So when you went along to your MMA and you started training this MMA, obviously in MMA, you kind of have to fit in all formats. Now, was that a case that your introduction to MMA was broken down? This is the way we do it. Say we do our MMA striking on a Wednesday, on a Monday we do MMA wrestling, and on a Friday we try to do it all where we cover some ground aspects. Was it structured in a way where you do different things on different nights, on set nights, or is it a case that where you're training you had jiu-jitsu coaches, wrestling coaches, and you were still training the individual systems?
Okay, so we in the particular MMA classes through the week when I first started out, when I first started proper regime at London Fight Factory, when I first started really training them, I was doing jiu-jitsu classes, boxing classes, Muay Thai classes, and MMA classes. So I did have, training. I was training for diligency in each respective discipline, still with the target being MMA. And then through the week, you'd have MMA where it'd be a little bit more focused on the ground, the cage, or the setting up boxing, that kind of thing. So we, and that was my first experience. I said to you before that when I stopped playing football, I started training, but actually I did go to this group of guys. They were setting up these mats in a squash court in a recreation center. So I remember I actually did for a few months. I think I did that like once a week. And I think then I went to LFF because I realized I saw on the website the timetable and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I can train every day. There's 3 sessions a day. This is amazing, So I think that was, and then that would be my first experience of, I guess, full-time training, really.
Yeah. Also, when I looked through your record, when I knew you was coming on, I looked more closely into not just who you fought, but what promotion you fought on. You had numerous bouts on, really good promotions that were really well known. BAM, I kind of miss that production, but Bellator started coming over to Europe and kind of took place of what BAMA was doing. So Bellator, so with Bellator, how was that for you? Is that considered like your step up, or was that your original place to go? Because nearly everyone seems to want to go UFC bound, but you touched with Bellator. Was that something that was always in the plan? And if so, would you want to get back there, or do you want to go on to UFC? What's sort of like your forecast for your wish and wants in the fight industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess Bellator kind of found me because, as you mentioned, it kind of enveloped Bama, and I was fighting for Bama. So I think because of that, I was probably one of the closer to the top of the list of the names that they wanted to bring as possible a roster to the UK Bellator. So that was more like chance, but again, like you play what's on your plate, don't you? And so I thought to myself, of course, Bellator, good route. UFC, of course, is always always a good option, but it just seemed to be the path I went down. Back in the day, it was probably Cage Warriors was like probably the top one in the country, and Bama kind of closely behind. But I know that Cage Warriors and Bama were the kind of those two, and then the Cage Warriors, of course, will tend to lead the pathway toward UFC more. So but that's just a route that happened for me. As far as my goals, do I want to get back to Bellator? Would I like to get back in the UFC? Answer to that is of course, But I would say ultimately more of my focus is the fights I want to have, the opponents I want to have, and I'm 37 years old now, so the reality is I want to look at how am I going to finish up my career with a level of closure, so that I can look back with no regrets, really, I know my ability, I know my skill level. I still feel like there's this untapped potential. And maybe a lot of people have this, but I feel definitely that I see the level that I truly have inside me. And I feel like that still hasn't been accessed. And I feel like a couple more years of that, in the next couple of years, or however more years I have left, I guess I'd want to attain a couple performances that I think emulated the fighter I was. If that makes sense,
Right. Sure.
Jeremy, do you feel so? I'm interested because as sport, particularly MMA, but sport generally, all sports, as time has gone by in the last 15, 20 years, as things like sports science have become more prevalent, the kind of age that athletes finish and retire has changed vastly. Like you look at football these days, 10 years ago, come sort of 30, 31, footballers were finishing, whereas you still got Cristiano Ronaldo collecting awards left, right, and centre at 38. So you mentioned you're 37. Do you feel like you're at your peak now, or do you feel like you're on the second sort of the final part of your career, or are you interested in kind of where you see that progression?
So for me, 100%, there's been zero decline. I feel like I've been gradually, over the years, developing and getting better. That's why I think there's so much to be said in this sport for longevity, because I do think that if I feel like I'm on the treadmill, and the longer I stay on the treadmill, the better I'm getting. You know what I mean? So I do feel like I'm improving faster than I'm aging. Let's put it that way. I know that may not last forever, but at the moment, I'll take my supplements like God willing, like you said, if the science agrees with me, then I'd like to feel, I feel like I do feel like physically, of course, like injuries and stay with you a little bit longer, and the recovery is different. It's not the same. But as a fighter, I feel definitely in my prime and the best fighter I've ever been, for sure. No question. And I hope that in the next couple of years that I can continue to develop to perhaps the best fighter I can possibly be before my body packs up.
But do you have a look at fighters? So you could look at Jim Miller. I'm just trying to have a look, see how old he is, because I think he's around your age. What is he now? 38. When you look at someone like Jim Miller, that's still, a huge, participator in the top fighters in the world. I mean, he's still taking top scalps. Do you ever look at people like that? Now you're approaching this sort of age. Are you looking at other people that age and see whether they still got it? And if so, people like Jim Miller, they must give you some confidence that you can still do it at your age.
I've been incentivized by the older guys, and even from the very beginning when I started watching UFC, and I'd see like Randy Couture, and obviously that would be the first and probably the strongest influence for someone being able to fight beyond beyond their years, kind of thing. Yeah, it's. I feel like I'm motivated definitely by seeing those older guys and seeing what they can do. And I know, to be honest, I keep myself, I'm a healthy guy. I've kept myself always in very good condition. So I feel like there's no reason why I haven't got those extra years in me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no question,
I think a lot of it is.
I find myself watching fights and rooting for the older guys.
Right, yeah. I do the same. Yeah. But I think a lot of it is the mindset. I mean, I was 37 when I chose to retire. But for me, I sort of like reached the heights that were available to me in any realistic means. It was in 2010. I think that was the year that UFC then introduced featherweight. At the time, there was only lightweight, and I just didn't feel that I was big enough to compete against some of the potential big weight cutting monsters. So that was not an option for me. So we obviously was in a different situation there. But you explaining that you don't feel that you've reached your full potential, regardless of what kind of onset of age might be doing or not doing to you, might not know about. But that's really intriguing to me. And I think mindset is such a strong tool. And you talk about being motivated, and you're increasing quicker than your body's demising. That goes to show you've really given this some thought. There's no question in your mind. You're pursuing dreams for another further 2 years and see what takes you from there. But yeah, that's really interesting, the way you've looked at yourself in that way.
Yeah. Well, Danny, I've never been someone to do something half-assed, and I think if there's a time that I'm not able to fight to what I consider, for myself a standard, I'm not able to conduct myself into camps, then maybe that'll be the time to pack it in. But yeah, no, as long as I'm still able to go hard, to train hard, and and improve, if I'm able to keep going up the mountain and keep improving. And it's funny because it's like, I mean, you don't have to do much. I feel like I'm doing a lot, but I feel like I don't have to do much in the sense that I just have to kind of keep plowing along, and the improvement is just being kind of natural and organic. I mean, it's not, because obviously it's about the people around you, and you work meticulous and stuff, but it does feel very much almost like the only thing I have to do is keep going, because I do feel like I keep getting better, genuinely, So that's the idea.
Jeremy, what sort of fighters did you or do you look up to over the years? Is there particular fighters that you have looked at, whether it's from a fighting style type of thing, who you see yourself as similar to, or whether you just you kind of looked up to their body of work or whatever it may be? What sort of fighters were your inspirations? Or
I always struggle with this question, because it's I have fighters that I've rooted for and liked, but they haven't always necessarily been the fighters that are more parallel to my style, necessarily. So I mean, it's hard for me to. I've got the people that I would say there is possibly, if you were to look more contemporarily and take someone like Khabib, Colby Covington, these are the kind of guys with certain elements of their game that I feel like I could model and some of my blueprint on those things. Those are the directions that my game needs to go, for example. So those kind of guys, definitely I'll look at that and I think, oh, that's kind of I can start to project myself into that kind of an image for sure. But no, off the top of my head though, I would say there's not been anyone that I've made an idol of necessarily or really modeled myself on. I would say more that I kind of jumped into the sport and kind of I guess I gravitated toward what I was good at, which was the wrestling, the grappling, fundamentally. And that's what I've continued to do. As you do, you play to your strengths, and
Absolutely. And what about influences on your career? Is there particular people who've had a big influence on you as your career has developed, and maybe particularly in the early days of your career? Who would you go to for advice, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so when I went to London Fight Factory, and I kind of I had a word with Luis Ribeiro, the professor, the black belt professor and owner of the gym there currently, and also at the MMA coach at the time, Abel Martinez. So those two guys, when I had a word with them, and it was like I think I want to try this, like, seriously or whatever, and they were really open with me, and really, like, they were so they took me under their wing. They didn't take any more membership money from me. And I feel like those two, they guided me in the right direction. They saw that I was hungry, and they just kind of gave me everything I needed to kind of to nourish me as a kind of as an up and coming fighter. So I would say, to be honest, as far as the initial incentive, my first MMA coach, Abel, and Louise, my current professor, and my current head coach. I mean, I work with London Fight Factory predominantly. Like, I do my technique and my drilling there and stuff like that. And I work also with Brad at GB Top Team. And so I'll do, about half the week there with my live rounds and other things. So I share my camp between those two camps, really. And I mean, the guys around me, like I said, Abel and Louise, my current coach, my main MMA head coach at LFF, Silvio Volk, who been a fantastic coach, comes from a Sambo background, and he really helped me a lot. He helped me when I was kind of coming up through for earlier stages of my fighting career. I had this, what I believe is a misconception, that I wanted to get I was aware that I was a good grappler, not that good a striker. I want to get as well-rounded as I can. And I think he showed me that it's not about being well-rounded. It's about having a blueprint and making sure that you have all those facets and all the things you need, boxing strength, whatever, but they all point toward the direction of your strength, And so that was a huge thing for me. I think that he helped me realize a lot of things. Working with Brad, again, that's a massive incentive because we all know Brad Pickett is and what he's done. But working closely with him as a coach and stuff like that, and what he added to my cage work and to my wrestling, is incredibly motivating. And he works hard. He works hard and trains hard still. And the guys that he runs like some of the best guys in the country down there. They're a really phenomenal team. So my work with all those guys, I'll look at them as guys that set an example for me, guys that have helped me and that have been there for me through my career. Those are the guys that really incentivize me.
Absolutely. Are you someone then, Jeremy, who likes to train in different places with different teams and different coaches, just to give yourself as much variation and knowledge as possible? Because I know, like regular viewers will know, Danny is someone who's a real proponent of that, of telling his fighters to go and train with other teams and other coaches to invest in yourself and to bring your skills to the highest point they can be and get more knowledge. Is that something which you like to do, or do you stick with a kind of group of people who you are tried and tested over time?
I think that generally for stability and things like that, sometimes for routine and for convenience, I'll tend to stick with the pattern of my camp, which means I'll stick generally with the training partners that I have to make it work, the sparring partners that I have at Top Team and stuff. But over my career, I've traveled to many different gyms and seen learned from many high level coaches, and I 100% think there's a lot to be said for collaboration and also for fighters going to in all places. Because definitely, I would say, I consider myself, quite, after nearly 15 years in the sport, highly knowledgeable and stuff like that. I go somewhere else and I'm talking to Ashley Grimshaw, for example, at GB Top Team. And, Ashley's, experienced guy like myself, really, really good winning record and stuff like that. And we should be on the same page, but he ends up showing me this thing to do with a single leg or whatever, which is just something I've never come across before, which is almost, for me, it's crazy that there's certain things that he brought to my attention that I could only have gotten with, accessing some outside knowledge. You know what I mean? So there's something to be said for that, for sure. I think with gyms, it's a tight dichotomy, because I don't think you can just go floating around. I don't think that the warrior world kind of lifestyle thing isn't necessarily beneficial like that. I think that there needs to be a balance between you kind of absorbing various points of view on the sport and stuff, but also at the same time, I think you need to be able to establish like a routine and a level of consistency, and I think that's important for a fighter. I think the routine, the consistency, it has to be almost paramount. It has to be. You have to make your days easy and repetitive, or else to make the training as tolerable and as endurable as possible, right? That's it.
Absolutely. Jeremy, just as we kind of as we look towards wrapping up, in terms of MMA as a sport overall, and I know this is it's a bit of a strange question, which I suppose some podcasts or people might not ask, but I'm interested in your view anyway. Like, where would you like to see MMA go now as a sport over the next, say 5 years? Like, what changes if you could make any changes to any part of the sport, what would you change? I'm a purist.
Change? You're not going to like the answer.
Yeah, no, I will, because I saw someone who, for instance, someone who I respect greatly, about as much as I respect Danny, which is a hell of a lot. A coach within the UK circuit recently put a post up on Twitter, I think it was, who said they would rather see 1 15-minute round than 3 5-minute rounds or 5 5-minute rounds. And I was really interested in that, just because of the big change in obviously what that would mean. And so I thought I'd ask the question, because I'm interested in what people generally would like to see changes in. Because the obvious one for me is the things around weight cutting and stuff like that, and how we can make that as safe as possible, but also as fair as possible. But I'm interested in what you think as a fighter, and then I'm going to throw the same question to Danny, who's also obviously an ex-fighter and a coach, because I'm interested in the differences in what people would like change.
Okay. All right. So let me go backward then. What was the last thing you said about the weight? I just gotten good at weight cutting. I think let's keep it. I've finally gotten good at cutting 10 kilos and putting 10 kilos back on. So as long as I'm not being disadvantaged, I'm all right. I'd rather take that weight cut now that I feel like I'm getting my head around it. But on a serious level, obviously for health and for just to make, really from a health point of view, I think that it'd be nice if we did something to make same day weigh-ins, something to make the weight cut a little less of a part of the fight. I don't think maybe the weight cut should be such an important part of fighting. I feel like sometimes getting the weight cut right is at 30% of the fight, So making that less of a thing would be nice, being able to wake up in the morning and just kind of be your natural weight roughly and not have to make that cut. I can imagine what that could do to the sport, But as far as the rules?
Yeah, well, anything you could change about the sport. I'm interested in what you would change. I thought
Pride had it great with a 10-minute round or 5-minute extra time. I thought that 15 minutes might be, I think that's great too, but I think that might be maybe quite an adjustment, But if I was to wave a magic wand and make the sport how I'd want it, then I'd make it a 10-minute first round with a 5-minute extra time. I'd legalize headbutts, and soccer kicks, but not head stomps.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone getting seriously injured by a headbutt. It's certainly not nice, because it's a hard part of the head, but you can only generate so much power with your head, with emotion. I think it would be really good for my, against the cage and clinch and full. It changes full guard. You know what I mean? Everyone's happy to full guard in MMA. If you're good at popping back up and controlling posture, you can really retain things well there. But headbutts would make full guard a little bit more dangerous for the guy in the bottom. I think maybe that might be good.
That's really interesting, because two of the things which you've said there are obviously two of the things that MMA and the UFC as a whole have got rid of to appeal more to the kind of casual fan, I guess, and the mainstream audience, to try and, you know, basically it's not cage fighting, it's a sport, and it's MMA, and it's this, and they took away headbutts, and they took away soccer kicks, and a few other bits and pieces like groin punches and some of the other stuff, which was obviously in the early days. So I'm really fascinated that headbutts and soccer kicks would be allowed in the rules of Jeremy Petley. Anything else?
Yeah, but I think soccer kicks to the head, I think they sound really barbaric, but they're going to present themselves in half-cut situations. It's not going to be someone's going to sit down on their knees and just take a head kick in the literal sense. It's actually really, really hard to try and get access to the head with any kind of real power, but it does add a little bit of woo to the situation on the ground. I think the original reason why they took headbutts out was because it was causing really bad scarring injuries to the person trying to apply the headbutt, hitting teeth and things like that. I think that's initially why they was taken out, because it was creating hematomas on the forehead, and of course when you've got swelling there, you're more likely to get a cut there, and of course that blood runs straight down into the eyes. I think too many fights will get
Pride, they disallowed the elbows because of that, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah.
Same reason, yeah.
I think the interesting rule, the difference in rule set makes it really, really interesting. It really does. It would certainly make an interesting equation, but I just think there would be too many injuries, for them ever to allow it back in. I really like the Pride rules where there's allowing to knee to the head on the ground. I think that just added a more interesting dynamic. So when you've got a north-south situation, you've got something impactful there to strike with, because normally in north-south, you don't really have any striking capability to the head. But if you've got a north-south scenario, you can obviously apply knees to the head.
You know what's really interesting about that rule? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you were able to knee him to the head north-south, but not in turtle, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Up position, yeah.
From what I can remember,
which you can make sense because you imagine more spinal, perhaps. It's like,
yeah, I think it was Mark Holman. Can't remember his name. Coleman or Holman.
Holman.
I think he beat Igor Vavnichin from that position. He
won the Grand Prix, didn't he? With that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Igor Vavnichin. It's a name that I mentioned to some of the young lads coming up the fighting ranks, and they've never heard of him. I'm like, what? You never heard of Igor Vavnichin? Amazing back in the day. Really, really was. But I also like that idea. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they do 1 10-minute round followed by a 5-minute round, don't they judge the whole entire fight? They don't break down any of the rounds, do they? And I would be more of a fan of perhaps the judging being on the entire fight than I would the individual rounds. I think that would be more of an interesting situation. But I don't think doing a 115-minute round will work, partly because fatigue's going to set in, and I think you're going to get a more ponderous fight, especially as you look through the different weight divisions. It might work at lightweight or welterweight and lower, but I don't think it worked very well, say, middleweight and higher. I just think it would become very, very ponderous.
Won't they?
Yeah, and
the
I think
I thought of was that Ken Shamrock versus Dan Severn fight, which went like 30 minutes to a draw.
Yeah.
And it was the worst fight to watch.
Yeah, it's just not good viewing.
They didn't do anything, did they?
And you will get your barn burners. You absolutely will. But I just think it just complicates things. You going to get people picking their moments so primely. A takedown artist, he could get you down and just sort of smother you around for 15 minutes. I don't think that's going to be good entertainment value for people, and I don't think people like Dana White will ever sanction that through. I think a lot of the reasons why we got things the way we got them is because of trial and error on what works and what doesn't work. I think that's pretty much how we're seeing the things the way they are. But so some of the things I think I would like to say, I think if you do the same day, I don't mean to be disagreeing with you here, Jeremy, but I'm just putting things.
Right. I know. My choices were a bit fantastical, but
that's okay. But same day weighing, it's a really nice idea, but you're going to still get people trying to cut weight, and the thing is, they'll go in even worse hydrated, and I think if we're going to think about protecting athletes regards their health with this whole weight cut situation, I think you should do a 2-day before weigh-in and have a set rule that you can only start, you get weighed in beforehand, you get weighed in on the fight day, so that you can't take this to extreme levels. That way, people's brains are going to get hydrated. I think particularly look at the issue that we just had in boxing that you mentioned last week. So I can't pronounce the guy's name, but in South Africa with the boxer, unfortunately, lost his life. Yeah. I think fighters would be much more safer with their neurological, potential for issues after their fight career if they can hydrate 2 days before the fight. I think that would be much more interesting. I think that would be much more safe. I still think the criteria of how you should wake up should all be the same. You've got 2 days to just feel better. And I think you'll actually have even better performances as well. And that's the thing with the broke down rounds. I think having these separated rounds, it freshens up the fighter. You're starting back from square one, and it can reignite the chance not to get taken down this time around, and so on and so forth. I just think it makes for better viewing. I really do.
Yeah, 100%.
No, I like that 2 day recovery. That's interesting. I never heard that before.
I think that's been done before. The 2 day. I think that's been done in Japan.
Okay.
But I can't think exactly what promotion did do it. It might. Yeah, no, I can't remember. It might have been Zest ZST. I actually fought on there one time, but I don't know whether it's them that brought it in. I'd have to research about it. But I think that would be a really good idea, and I think that would sit comfortable for many athletes in that. It'll be done with their health in mind, not only for the bout itself, but for after their careers.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So some of the issues people are going to have are going to present themselves when they're in their 50s and 60s. That's when all the damage is going to show itself through, unfortunately. And I think that would do a strong thing in the favour of fighters being able to live out their fight careers and minimize any potential neurological issues as they get older. I'm struggling to say all those words.
I gotta agree with you there, man. To be honest, yeah. I mean, it's a dangerous sport enough as it is, and I understand. It's like it does feel silly to add such an extra unnecessary risk,
For sure. Look, that was a really interesting conversation to finish off with Jeremy. Jeremy, I really appreciate your time. That hour's flown by.
Thank you.
It's really gone quick. Really appreciate your time. Best of luck with your fight in July, and we'll definitely get you back on after your fight, and you can tell us how it went and whatnot. And hopefully, you'll be moving on to your next fight and bigger and better things.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much, guys, for having me. I do hope I can come back and chat with you guys again soon. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Jeremy, good luck.
All
the best, Danny. Si, take care, guys.
Thank you.
Good stuff. That was good. I like that. Good conversation. And
absolutely.
What a question by me. I don't know where I.
That was a good question. That was a good question. I got to give it that.
Questions these days. I'm just.
But I kind of dressed your question up by answering extremely well.
I switched off when you started talking about it. It was very, 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 very poor. But Jeremy's was really good. I like his answer. Headbutts. If he had just said groin punches as well, I'd have been like, okay, let's go. Bring back the UFC one. Oof.
Yeah.
How would you tell Jordan to defend groin punches?
Well, they have to be pinpoint accurate. I've seen him in the shower, so there's not a lot of risk of someone landing on that little button.
Excellent.
I think it was Keith Hackney against Joe Son, where the groin strikes. Everyone was going, "Oh my God!" He held him in a side control position, and he was literally punching him in the ball bag time and time again. That Joe Son, I think we mentioned before when we was doing coverage of the old UFC. He's in prison. Yeah, he's doing life. I think he was in for something relatively small in comparison to what he's doing now, but I think he murdered someone in prison, and so he's just added to his time to a point where he won't be ever coming out.
Yeah, indeed. Right there, mate. We got about 10 minutes or so to talk about last night's UFC 275. It's a great show. We'll kind of just go through the finishes and then just the fights a bit generally. So I'm going to throw about a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw the fights which finished to you first, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about, there was the Chevchenko one which went to a decision. We started off with Jack Della Maddalena defeated Ram Ramazan Imov via TKO punches, 2.5 minutes of the second round.
Yeah, I think it was the body shots. This is the ones at the body shots. Did you watch this one?
I haven't
not?
seen this fight. I've
Yeah,
seen the others.
It was a body shots that seemed to start that process where he curled over and then took a few more shots. Generally, a good performance. Jack had to get through a very difficult situation that he'd been dash choked, and he was looking really touch and go whether he's going to survive it. But he broke free from there, started to go on the attack from the get go, caught Amiev to the body. Dropped him. And, this is the thing with body shots, or liver shots in particular, even worse than just a straight body shot. If you get hit in the liver, it's a horrendous experience. I remember actually looking on YouTube on why it's so painful to get hit in the liver. And it reverberates through all your organs. It's a horrific experience. It literally makes you stop breathing for a set period of time and makes your body go into like a seizure where you feel that you can't move. So it might have been the case that it hit him on the liver. But it's a body shot that ended it. And body shots are just one of those things, more, perhaps even more so than potential knockouts. Look, you can knock someone dizzy, and predominantly you'll probably see them survive it in some way, some form. But you see someone really get hurt to the body, because you really show it. It's almost impossible not to show. It'll lead you to a quick demise, and it was demonstrated there by Jack.
Yeah, I just watched it, just having a look now. It's Miav's body, like all up his side of his ribs, is just bright red, where he's taking some big shots, and then it just looks like eventually it gets too much for him, and he kind of almost turtles down then, doesn't he? And so he caught with a big one. But I do think, though, mate, we talk about how brutal body shots can be. I do still think that it's an underutilized tactic within just generally.
To be honest, you have to be a pretty skillful striker, to be able to cut angles, measure up the range to land those body shots in. And very, very rarely it'll be a single body shot that just comes in. Normally it's prepped up with some headshots, with footwork, to get you that range and that angle. Because most people sit back with their hips very, very slightly. So you've got to understand that the head is very marginally closer than the body is. And you've kind of got to drop levels and drop your hands to throw a strike at the body. So it's a very, very skillful thing to do at a proficient level. And, if you're not very good at it and you attempt it one too many, you're going to get clobbered on the way in. We've seen that time and time again. So anyone that's successful with body shots, especially on a fairly often success rate, is really commendable to the level of striking. For me, I never really attained that kind of level of striking with my hands to be able to access the body like you're seeing today. I was more of a fast jabber and leg kicker. I'd perhaps had that style of kicking that's about today in terms of kicking at the shins and knees. That perhaps wasn't seen much back then, but I always really, really respect people that can access the body. Not so much with a kick, I think that's an easier approach, but certainly with the hands and trying to target the liver specifically, I think that's a very, very skillful thing to do.
Indeed, mate. And then we had Jake Matthews defeated Andre Fialho via a KO punch. 2.5 minutes of round 2.
Yeah, a really good war. Fialho was looking frustrated in there. He normally holds a very, very tight form. He maintained that form, but he certainly expressed some frustrations and maybe had a little bit of a giveaway at how he was trying to come in. He ended up trying to be physical coming in, but Matthews just had the measure of him in terms of timing and range. Matthews was holding a lower guard, seeing things a little bit perhaps more clearly, and banking on that to work for him, and it was working for him. Fialho was just failing time and time again, so he just tried to put work ethic in, hoping it would be the answer to his problems. He just started getting hit more and more. Matthews performed very, very well. I just think on a striking format, it was just set up for Matthews. It just worked very, very well with him. I don't want to disregard Matthews' ability to strike, but I don't necessarily think if he comes up against another different stylist of striker, he'd be as effective. I just think Fialho's style was just absolutely prime for him. And Fialho, I felt bad for him because it looked like he should be doing good things, but he just wasn't getting the work off. He just wasn't making it happen for himself. And I felt his frustration watching it. But let's not take nothing away from Matthews. He looked really, really good. Really, really developed. Look, this kid can grapple some as well. So now he's got this striking seemingly advanced from his previous performances. I'm sure it's going to get a few people in that weight division sitting up and looking with attention and wanting to study his game.
100%, mate. 100%. It's about, he's got to keep learning and keep moving, haven't he? He's got to keep developing his skills.
Yeah.
And then we had the knockout of the night for me. Zhang Weili, who is a big favourite of mine, I've got to say, faced Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And,
yeah, I've got a lot of respect for both these female fighters.
Yeah, I love Joanna, but like Zhang Weili to me is just an animal. Like she is just one of them.
She's incredible. She comes with a lot of layers. Yeah, it was a hell of a knockout. It was a spinning back fist for those who haven't seen it yet. If you haven't seen it, you need to go and have a watch of it. Even the whole fight, even though it wasn't long, it was a very good performance.
Striker, mate. Zhang Weili is like, I saw a few people saying, "Oh yeah, but anyone who's decent with the jiu-jitsu and stuff would just tap her out easily." And I was like, "Nah, I think she's shown enough with her.
She's well-rounded.
Some other stuff.
No, she's well-rounded.
I think her only loss is against. Is it Nunes? I think I'll have to check.
No.
Who did she lose to?
Oh my goodness, Rose. Rose. She lost to Rose.
That's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good fight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk is obviously retired.
I didn't know that. She retired. Did she retire after that?
She's 35. She wants to have children. She wants to be a businesswoman.
Oh, fair play to her.
And what a career.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame to see her to go because, at one point, she was looking almost untouchable. But the women's sector of this sport is, still fairly recent, and it's really evolving quick. And you're slowly but surely, I wouldn't even say slowly, I'd say fairly quickly, getting this level, this vibration of level that's increasing. This depth of level in each weight division is really increasing very, very quickly. And now we're already seeing someone of like mid-30s, if you don't move with the times, you're falling behind the times. And Joanna was just looking vulnerable, not because she wasn't anything of a lesser athlete as she was before, but she just didn't move with the times in terms of its advancements. Someone like Zhang Weili, she's evolving at all times. She's really married to the sport. Perhaps this is why Joanna has not performed as well in recent years, because she has got some outside interests, perhaps relationship-wise or certainly business-wise, if she wants to move her career to something else. So maybe that whole thing was making her tempo behind the advancements that have been really, really, seen at high velocity in the women's section. So look, Zhang Weili, she's back up there. Could be that she's going to fight for the title again. I don't know. Perhaps so. I mean, that's been spoken about.
I just wonder. I don't know. I wonder whether they do put her against Rose before they put her in the title again, just because she's lost twice to Rose. But I don't know. Like Joanna's obviously up there as a top fighter, and you've got Carla Esparza there. So I suppose maybe they would put Zhang Weili, because I think Zhang Weili would beat Carla Esparza, I think. So if that's the case, and you did that fight,
I don't think that's going to be a foregone conclusion.
No, I don't. I think it's a tough fight.
Esparza can mix in with the takedowns. I think that's the kind of thing that becomes problematic for Zhang Weili. Not to say that she hasn't evolved her game to deal with it, but I think that's a very interesting matchup, and I think that's the most attractive matchup. I think more likely, to be honest.
I think they'll do that, and then if Zhang Weili does win, you've got the option to rematch Esparza, depending on how that fight was to go, or you can then bring Rose back into it, and of course then you've got it in the reverse where Zhang Weili is the champion and Rose is going for the title. But so, there's lots of options. But I'll with Joanna, I just think, maybe what you're saying is right about her having outside interests, but ultimately I just think everyone else has got better.
That is the case, but you've got to argue why, and I think it could be down to things like that. I mean, you have to be so dedicated these days, especially at UFC levels.
Yeah, but I think the women's coaches, everything is improved. in the last 5, 6, 7 years, whereby like you've got people coming over from Singapore and Asia, and you've got people coming over from Europe and coming over from Australia and New Zealand, and all these different fighters coming over. They're training with the very, very top coaches. And if you haven't got the mentality or the dedication to keep improving, even if you were once the best, like Joanna was, you're not gonna stay there because everybody around you is getting better. And even if you look at the girls lower down the rankings, they're all getting better and better and better as the fight. I can't think of many of the females who are like lower down the rankings. I feel like we're always constantly saying, "Oh, she's improved from the last time we saw her fight." Or, she's addressed this or she's addressed that. And even if you're at the top, if you're not going to keep improving, you won't stay there.
So as simple as that.
Before we go into Valentina and Talia Santos, let's talk about the main event. You had Jiri Prakshada versus Glover Texera. This was a fight and a half, mate. This was one of the best fights I've seen in quite some time. It reminded me of John Jones versus Gustafsson 1. That was the kind of feel it gave me. It was just epic.
This was an interesting match for so many reasons in that they were so opposites. You got one that's really kind of past his physical prime, and you got someone that's absolutely in their physical prime. You got someone relatively short in that division, not particularly tall in that division, that likes the hands, and then you got someone like Jiri who likes his hands and his kicks and jumping knees. He's very, very long range. You've got someone like Texera, although he's got very good striking in terms of his boxing, his hands. He loves his grappling, extremely high level grappler. And then you got Jiri that, his grappling really isn't up to world class standards. Absolutely not. But it goes to show you how this youth and his frame that becomes such a difficulty for Texera, that Texera ended up getting into such physical deficit that he ended up getting choked out against someone that in comparison of level on the ground is a white belt versus a black belt. But this is the interesting aspect of the sport. This is MMA, and when you're exhausted, even in your strongest realm, you can lose. And that's absolutely what we saw here. Jiri absolutely frustrated me, although a good performance. He's good to watch every time. He's always exciting, absolutely that. But my God, he's off balance so often. He strikes with no proper guard, off balance so often, makes some bad decisions. But he seems to fight with no fear. He's got cardio for days, got a really long reach, like an 80-inch reach, very, very tall at the weight. He's got some unique qualities, but if he can only but tidy himself up, I'd say we've got a champion here that's here to stay. But I think because he's got so many holes in his game, I think if it was a younger Texera, he wouldn't have won that fight. And I think there's so many other young, tenacious, well-rounded people in that weight division. I'm not just sure that with his current skill set, he will stay champion. And I really don't want to sort of shit on his parade in terms of him getting the title. I'm very, very happy and love watching him fight. But I also have frustrations watching him fight. And I think any educated MMAist will be scratching their head at how someone with so many flaws in their game can just keep on notching up wins. So he must have something about him that's obviously getting the results time and time again and up at this level. But to me, the Glover Texera was just demonstrating his age difference. I mean, this was the problem for him. It was over 5 rounds. Jiri always pushes a hard pace, a crazy pace that's really, really hard to read. And his age just caught up with him all in that last round, or in fact rounds before that, but he managed to get through it. But the only reason Glover Texera was in the fight round after round was because Jiri was just making so many incredible mistakes. But I don't want to take away from any of the good work that both of them have done.
Maybe it was nerves that it was a big fight for him. Like, people forget it's only his 3rd fight in UFC. Like, we've talked a bit about like how they've looked after certain fighters as they've come into the promotion. He's fought Dominic Reyes, Ozdemir, and now he's the lightweight champion, beating Texera. He has been thrown in at the deep end in a big way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but he believes in himself.
He's a monster. He's a big boy.
you see when he gets up off the mat, he jumps up and he's jumping on the spot before he comes out for each round. He almost has a childistic behavior to his enthusiasm to be in there. But the man definitely needs to be educated in the completion of what MMA is all about. You know, I think if he ever went under the camp, someone like with DC, they would just do absolute wonders for the guy. But he does need correcting in so many different ways. Some people might argue, not saying, look, well, he's just beat Texera, you know, but to me, he beat an old man, and not to take anything away, but he beat an old man at the end of the day. You know, could you imagine me against Texera in some of the positions he gave away that was perhaps 38 or 39? I don't think he would have got away with it. And again, I don't mean to be shitting on his parade. I like to be a realist. I'm just putting it out there on how I see things. That's what I'm on here to do. And I'm also happy to accept that other people might not agree with me. But I think I put a good argument that this is the reason why he won. Look, you watch these two guys grapple in the gym. Texera be all over him, tapping him out several times around. But this is the difference with the sport of MMA. You're tired because of the striking, because of the exertion of having to take someone down. And these are all the things that wore on Glover. And then just to expose him, you know, to be completely helpless right at the very end of that final round in where he got choked out. He would never, ever make those mistakes had he had his wits about him in terms of having energy and clarity of mind. I think he was so exhausted, he just wasn't even thinking clearly anymore. But well done to Jerry. Let's not take anything away from him.
It's going to be difficult.
He is going to be difficult for B because he's such an oddity in terms of how he goes about competing in the MMA arena. He doesn't do what normal people do.
And he hasn't been make those mistakes you mentioned. He hadn't made them in the previous two fights against Reyes and Ozdemir. So if you put it down to, if you work on the fact, right, it was a big fight, it was for the championship, let's put it down to nerves, then he is an ominous figure to be at the top of that division. He's young, he's big for the division, but he's skillful as well. So it's going to be that light heavyweight division is going to be very interesting.
Yeah. I just think a lot of people will be looking at that. When I say a lot of people, I don't mean the fans. I think a lot of the other fighters are going to be looking at that, saying there's a massive hole in his game, particularly with the wrestling and the grappling aspects. But you know, just
get him
the
down,
thing.
though, haven't you? That's the problem.
You know, getting him down. That's one issue, because he likes his jumping knees. You have to go through some potential flack to get him down. But when you get him down, he has shown some abilities to get back to the feet, although not entirely correct. You can just do an anti-jiu-jitsu. Just because you're on the ground doesn't mean you've got to play jiu-jitsu. And he chose not to, and was getting back to his feet enough to take the energy out of Glover. And it led to him winning. Yeah.
Right, just to finish this off, mate, talk to me a bit about Valentina Chevchenko defeating Talia Santos. It was a split decision. So on paper, if you look at that, that is the most vulnerable Valentina has looked in a long time for it to go to a split decision. Is that the true story of the fight?
Well, I just think Santos is not only technically very gifted, very, very good. She makes good decisions on the job, but she's also incredibly strong. And she was being technical. I don't want to say it was outright strength, but it was that athleticism, that strength that she had to muscle out of some of these positions, along with her technical know-how, that was just leaving Chevchenko on the receiving end of some of those takedown exchanges. And we've never seen it before. Chevchenko, though, she's just such an incredible tactician and strategist. She was actually able to change her approaches numerous times, but kept on getting found out. But she did change it up. So there was one point where she did the head and arm throw and then tried to step over to take the back into an armbar, but it ended up planting her on her back again, which, you know, you got to take your hats off to Santos. You know, she was having to deal with some very complex exchanges in terms of MMA exchanges, and was coming off better in many times. Only issue, I think, what went against Santos was there were times when she had the back, but she was very inactive in terms of trying to get off some strikes. So what people got to understand is when you're on someone's back and you're on your back, it's very, very hard to generate any kind of meaningful power to attack with strikes. So you're pretty much resigned to rabbit punching and then trying to choke the person and maybe switch off for an armbar, which could lead to you being underneath with someone in your open or closed guard. So that comes with consequences. So she was promptly trying to choke, but she was getting hit more. And even when you had situations where Chevchenko was on her back in the closed and open guard, Santos was receiving predominantly all the strikes. She was being palm strike, punched, elbowed, had submissions thrown up on her. So she was left defending a lot of the positions that she had, certainly with the guard position against Chevchenko. And I think all this perhaps went against her and gave the nudge for the judges in the favor of Chevchenko. But Chevchenko's got new problems to address, only in the anticipation of knowing who and what you're up against and trying to prepare for them. I think that she's had it her own way so often that perhaps she wasn't preparing or wasn't expecting to be losing some of these exchanges, because it seemed to be in her responses to go for the takedown and the clinch. She started to nullify that and bring that back out of her game, didn't she, in round 4 and 5, which is why I say that she's an incredible tactician and strategist, because she's actually changing on the job. She's got such a technical, big pool of techniques to switch around from. She started using the strikes, and when the clinch ensued, she would break free and throw elbows. So she's really changing things up. Santos wasn't changing things up so much. We did have this as well. Part of the equation here was, I think they said it was in round 3 where you had a clash of heads. This is the problem when you're going to get two prime strikers that are on opposite stance. This can potentially happen more so than when you're same side stance. That was a little unfortunate and could have had a little bit of bearing on Santos's pace being, put into reserve, because she did start receiving more strikes than she had ever received on the feet and was looking more shy at entering in. She entered very, very late in round 4 with a takedown, but was not enough to take the round off Chevchenko. I think they said it was all pending on how they was going to score round 2 or 3. I can't remember which one of the two, but it was really quite close. But I just think things that went in against Santos was the fact that she was hunting for that submission and not getting off the strikes, and she was receiving strikes even though she was on the back of Chevchenko, and likewise with the guard situation. Brilliant fight to watch. Anyone that's a true fan and understands martial arts on any given level would really appreciate the tussle that these two had. It's one of those fights that intrigued me that much. It's one that I will go back to another little review of, and to satisfy my mind on whether I think the judges went in the right way or not. Because I don't know whether there's been much said about it. Has there been much said about how the decision? Because there were a few boos in the crowd. I don't know whether you picked up on that. It seemed the crowd wasn't happy about it.
I think it might have been Shevchenko so popular, though, more than anything.
Yeah. But, she actually got some boos, it seemed to be, or some disapproval. But I don't think for her. I think maybe for the judging. Yeah. But, yeah, if it went either or way, I wouldn't be arguing it. It was that close. I'd have to sit and digest it a second time, because there was a lot went on. Come on, there's 5 rounds to digest there with a lot of exchanges and a lot of different tactical and positional things that were switching up per round. It was brilliant to watch.
Yeah, indeed it was. Lots and lots of exciting things coming up over the next few weeks. As is tradition, we'll just have a quick look at next week's UFC. UFC London coming fast and furious, mate, the way it's going. Next week, Kelvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett is the main event. But we also have Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lozon and Tim Means versus Kevin Holland.
Yeah, we've got some good ones there.
There's some good fights there, which, maybe not the biggest names, but I think all of those 3 fights are superb. Really
yeah. Sometimes it don't have to necessarily be the biggest names to have the biggest performances. That's generally very, very good matchmaking there. I think we're heading for a very good conversation on that one after it's happened.
Indeed, mate. So do you remember what the date is for UFC London? Oh, there, got it. July 23rd. So what have we got announced so far for that? Curtis Blades, Tom Aspinall, Darren Till, Jack Hermanson, and Mohamed Makayev versus Charles Johnson. There you are. Molly McCann versus Hannah Goldie. Nikita Krylov versus Alexander Gustafsson. That's a good fight.
Oh, wow. That's a good fight right there.
Listen to this one, though. Paul Craig versus Volkan Ozdemir. And Mark DeCasey versus Damir Hadovich. There's some good fights. Paddy Pimblett versus Jordan Levitt. What else we got? Let's have a look what we got on the prelims, shall we? They haven't separated them. Right, so that's it at the moment. But I know Jack Shaw's on a US card before that. He's fighting Ricky Simone on the main card of the week before UFC London. So July is looking real good. We got also got the Santos versus Fiziev. We've also got Israel Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier and Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. And Strickland versus Pereira and Sean O'Malley versus Pedro Munez all on the same card. Oof.
And if people like to forecast things further ahead of that, we finally got Usman versus Leon Edwards for 278.
Yeah, that's 278, is it?
Yeah, so we've got a little bit of time for that. That's August the 20th. Oh,
there's so many good fights coming. July and August look marine.
Oh, it's just getting insane. It's getting insane. And this, look, you think about it, anyone in the top 20 in UFC, you could match them. You know, you can have just incredible cards time and time again. I mean, it's a fight picker's dream. It really is, with the level that there is in UFC.
Who was Leon Edwards lost to?
He's lost to Usman. You can look at his record.
Quick look now. So he lost to Usman via a unanimous decision back in 2015. Yeah. I do think Leon Edwards is a completely different fighter to 2015.
Oh, however, absolutely is.
So is Usman, though.
That's the thing. Usman's really advanced. He's striking to such a level that he don't have to do what he's predicted to always do. He can now beat people purely by striking, but he really has all the tool sets. The only place that we haven't really seen him is on his back, but who's going to get him there?
Who else he lost to? Oh, he got disqualified back in the early days of his career, 2012, on a UK card, and he lost to Claudio Silva via a split decision in his UFC debut. So actually, apart from Usman, Leon Edwards has had pretty much the perfect card, other than the no contest versus Belal Muhammad. So that's going to be fascinating because they're both such different fighters from 5-7 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd be really interested. I got a feeling he might do him.
He's got all the skill sets to pull this off. He really, really has.
Unfortunately, though, Kamara Usman is an absolute killer. Fabian Edwards, his brother's got a big fight coming up as well soon, I think.
Yeah, but he done fantastic last time out.
We beat what's it called, isn't it?
Machida.
Sure, he's got another. Did they name that fight? No, thought they must have. So he's beaten his last two fights. He's beaten Austin Vanderford, who's obviously recently fought for a title. He lost to Austin Vanderford, who then went on to fight for a title, and then he beat Leon Machida. So yeah, it's going to be interesting what they do with Fabian next. Yeah. Lots to come, mate. Lots to come. Right. As always, Danny, it's been a great pleasure. Guys, please do check out Heights. It's yourheights.com and use the code ACE Nation for 10% off your first subscription. And let us know your results as well. I'd be really interested. I've heard very, very good things about them. We're having a little trial with them to see if people like it. Brain care. It's the future. Look after yourselves. Good night. God bless. Take care.
Good night, Si.
We'll be back next week. I forgot. Next week, we're joined by Cage Warriors title contender, Rhys McKee, 5 days before his world title fight in Belfast, his hometown. So that is going to be a real interesting guest and show to have because, what a week, what a big week for him it is. So always enjoy having Rhys on as well because he's a
good guy.
Top lad. Right, we'll be back next week. Join us.
Good.